Hey everyone, Ethan here. Pokemon Crystal was somehow an incredibly influential game for me growing up. Despite it not being the first, second, or even third generation that I played, this game specifically always stuck out to me in a positive sense. I didn't even get to play an official version where I could save until the Virtual Console release. Many years ago, I actually recorded and uploaded a no commentary Let's Play of this game. Although while I doubt anyone will find it, you probably don't want to. It's not special and even suffers from low resolution and desynced audio. Regardless, this video is a follow-up to my previous video on Gold and Silver, which I highly recommend watching before this video. Speaking of that video, I want to extend a huge thank you to everyone who watched, liked, and interacted with that video, bringing it to over 500 views, making it my most viewed Pokemon video. I'm truly happy to have the privilege of talking about milestones pretty much video after video. Let's set the scene to make sure we know what we're dealing with. Pokemon Crystal, much like Gen 1's Pokemon Yellow, is a third enhanced version of the game in its generation, Gold and Silver, that was released a year or so afterwards, and seeks to upgrade every facet of those games. While Yellow didn't do too much in this regard, besides adding elements from the anime, Crystal builds on the themes of GS by putting a bigger focus on the legendary beasts, specifically Suicune being featured on the cover. The game also adds new features that would go on to be loved staples and makes tweaks to attempt to make it the definitive Johto experience. Before I dive into what Crystal brings to the table, I first want to make a revision to information I presented in my Gold and Silver video. In that video, I said that there still wasn't a way to see what a move does or what its stats are. This is actually mostly incorrect, as you can view the information on the moves that the Pokemon in your party currently knows, which includes the power and type as well as a short description of the move. It sucks that you can't see this info when your Pokemon are trying to learn the move so that you can compare them, but this being here is much better than nothing and would only be improved on in generations to come. When it comes to the new additions Crystal brings to the table, there's no better place to start than the changes and additions to the story. While the overall plot is largely the same, a new subplot is added involving Suicune, which helps tie it and its other two legendary beasts in with Ho-Oh. The Burn Tower is now a mandatory stop on your journey since the gym leader Morty hangs out here until you encounter the beasts. Besides the tower having a new layout, the entire situation is slightly different. Upon entering the building, you'll be greeted by new character Yucine, who shares with you that his goal is to finally find the legendary Suicune after searching for so long. Well, instead of voluntarily going to the basement yourself, you now find yourself unintentionally falling down there when the floor at your feet gives out after a battle with your rival. The beasts jump away like usual, except now Suicune will show interest in you before leaving. From here, Entei and Raikou roam the region while Suicune instead is next found in Cyanwood City. It's here where you battle Yucine for the only time. His team is very easy to defeat and only contains Kanto Pokemon, but I at least like that his team seems to be specifically built to catch Suicune. Suicune will also flee here. You can optionally find it outside the middle entrance of Mount Mortar, but this isn't required to catch it. After the events of the Rocket Radio Tower, Suicune will await your presence on the first floor of the Tin Tower, where you'll battle it like any other legendary. The only other story change is that after being defeated, Claire now requires you to pass the quiz in the Dragon's Den rather than picking up a Dragon Fang. This new story bit helps flesh Claire out a little more, although it doesn't make her more likable. Crystal actually introduced a surprising amount of new features that would go on to become series staples. The first and probably most important of which is the ability to play as a female character. Up until now, in RBY and GS, you were forced to play as a male. Now with Crystal, one of the first questions asked before you start your adventure is if you're either male or female. For anyone curious, the girl's canon name is Chris, obviously being short for Crystal. The gender you choose has no bearing on gameplay apart from what your character sprite looks like. The other stable feature that Crystal introduces is the Battle Tower. The Battle Tower is a facility where you battle against other non-playable trainers where your levels are usually the same, you have the same amount of Pokemon, which in this game is locked to 3, you gain no XP from those battles, and you're unable to use items in battle apart from held items. This game's battle tower is located on the beach just outside of Olivine City and offers different level stages, allowing you to take it on at any point in your journey. When entering, you choose what level you'd like to face, with the options being intervals of 10. The Pokemon you enter with cannot exceed the level you choose, but can be under it. Every Pokemon you face will be the same level you pick, regardless if your Pokemon are under-leveled or not. Your goal is to win 7 battles in a row. Doing so will reward you with 5 of a random stat-boosting vitamin. I chose to only challenge this after beating Red, with my Pokemon being in the mid-50s, thus having to pick level 60. I'll be honest, I got destroyed almost every time, and I don't think it was fully due to the 5-level difference. I was simply outmatched, with every trainer using well thought out movesets. The furthest I managed to get after about 5 total attempts was beating 2 trainers. In hindsight, I probably should have battled the level 40 option right before fighting the League, since all of my Pokemon were exactly 40 and the opponents would have likely been a bit easier. Regardless, if you love battling tough opponents, then this is a great addition. There are 2 more new additions I'd like to cover, though they're both very minor. The first is that when entering a location, whether it be a route, city, cave, or whatever else, will now display a banner on the bottom third of your screen telling you the name of the location you entered. This can actually be super useful, since now you don't have to pull out the town map to see the name of your location, and is especially handy when hunting the legendary beasts. The last addition is a new radio show called Buena's Password. Unlike every other channel on the radio before, this show can actually provide you with useful rewards. Specifically, every night from 6 PM to midnight, a password will be played on the show. If you then present this password to Buena in the Goldenrod radio tower, she'll add a point onto an item made just for this minigame called the Blue Card. You can accumulate up to 30 points, and you can spend them on useful items like Ultra Balls, full restores, nuggets, vitamins, and even rare candies. It's unfortunate that there's only a 6-hour window to get your daily point, but I think that the rewards make up for it, especially with their surprisingly low cost. In addition to the new things that were added with Crystal, there are also a fair amount of changes to them. This is typically common for a third version, with most changes trying to improve or fix issues the initial version had. One change that helps less familiar players navigate the world better is the addition of more required dialogue. I'm talking about 2 specific instances here, but there are likely more that I didn't catch. The first is that when you leave New Barktown after obtaining Pokeballs, you'll be asked by an NPC if you want to be shown how to catch Pokemon. Selecting yes will give you a tutorial. The other is that the Sudowoodo blocking your access to the northern part of the region now has one of the Flower Shop NPCs next to it, so it's much more easily telegraphed as to how you're supposed to progress. To somewhat go along with trying to teach the player about new mechanics, there's an egg that you can now receive from the daycare couple after talking to them for the first time. This egg, known as the Odd Egg, is unique in that it could actually hatch into one of 7 potential Pokemon, with all of them being the new baby Pokemon. Regardless of what Pokemon you get, it'll always start with the exclusive move Dizzy Punch. More interesting though is that the Pokemon hatched from this egg has a relatively high chance of being shiny. The odds to hatch any shiny Pokemon are 14%, which is some of the highest odds the series has ever seen, even to this day. Each Pokemon has their own probability of being the Pokemon hatched and their own shiny probability, with the non-shiny variants ranging from 8 to 16% and shinies ranging from 1 to 3%. This egg is actually the only way to get a fair number of evolution lines before the post-game, making it a great addition besides the wonderful shiny odds. A more story-focused change is that the Ruins of Alph have been upgraded slightly to now include treasure rooms, which house 4 items each. The rooms are locked behind cryptic puzzles that require you to do something typically unorthodox, like using an HM move you wouldn't need to otherwise, bringing a specific Pokemon, or even using an item that you wouldn't think to initially. I think this was done to give players a better reason to visit the ruins, and since they highlight Unknown more in the opening, despite this being the only change involving them. The last change I want to go over is that there are more trainers to battle than in GS. I don't know the exact extent of which trainers are new and which ones aren't, since I'm pretty sure that some routes received a new trainer, but the main areas where it's undeniable are Mount Mortar and the Dragon's Den, which both have a handful now, up from 0 previously. This actually does make grinding feel much less necessary, which goes a long way for me personally. There are a few more changes I want to go over, all of which pertain to wild Pokemon. Crystal made some good strides in making the pool of Pokemon usable for playthroughs more varied. They firstly made Pokemon that were only available later on in game catchable much earlier, like Phanpy, Teddiursa, Hoppip, Poliwag, and Growlithe, all now being obtainable before snagging your first badge. There's also the aforementioned Odd Egg, allowing several Pokemon to be usable before Kanto. There was also a nice change allowing Sneasel to be caught in the Ice Path rather than needing to wait until Mount Silver. But in the process, the Magmar line was changed to be only obtainable in Johto through the Odd Egg no longer being in the Burn Tower. Unfortunately, no other Kanto-locked Johto Pokemon received the same treatment, which is still one of the weirdest decisions in a Pokemon game to this day in my opinion. On a much better note, the Evolution Stones are actually available before Kanto now, although they are locked behind specific trainers calling you on your Pokegear. Thankfully though, it is made easy with the exploit of toggling daylight savings time. Crystal did thankfully bring most of the version-exclusive Pokemon together in one version, but chose to omit a handful of species entirely. Specifically, Gen 1's Primeape and Ninetale lines, but even some Johto ones, being Ampharos, Girafarig, and Octillery. These omissions are terrible, to the point where I've heard people preferring Gold and Silver to Crystal just because you could use Mareep. I was originally going to use Octillery in my playthrough, but had to change course once I found out that I couldn't. Lastly, Ho-Oh and Lugia are now both only catchable after beating the League, and are now level 60. Lugia is encounterable after getting the Silver Wing from the Old Man and Pewter, while getting the Rainbow Wing requires you to catch all 3 legendary beasts now. I originally intended on doing this, but eventually found Raikou and Entei too annoying to both encounter and more so catch. I plan to use my Master Ball for one of them and trap the other with Mean Look, but since both beasts know the move Roar, they're able to get out of the battle anyway, so I eventually gave up on this idea. Also, on the topic of legendaries, it is technically possible to catch Celebi in Crystal, although it depends on the console you're playing on. On the 3DS Virtual Console version, after beating the League, you'll receive the GS Ball, which allows you to battle a single wild Celebi in the Ilex Forest. This event is impossible to do legitimately on the original console due to it needing Japan-exclusive region lock hardware. It's that time again for my favorite part of each Pokemon video, that being the part where I talk about the team I used for my playthrough for this video. I knew when all 3 Johto teams were planned out that this team was probably going to be my favorite of them, and so far that's very much true. My starter was Bracket the Meganium. Next, after several Phanpy running away from me, I caught Jimbo the Donphan. My next team member was Suban the Clefable from the Odd Egg, which took 5 total eggs. That doesn't sound like a lot, but each egg takes about 15 to 20 minutes to hatch. Either way, it could have been much worse. And yes, I did reset over a shiny. 3 in fact, being 2 Pichu and an Igglybuff. And no, it was not easy to do that once, let alone thrice. After meeting Bill and Eckerteak, he gifted me an Eevee, which I evolved into Jolteon and nicknamed Soleil. While the Cleffa didn't end up being shiny, I wasn't upset since I knew I was guaranteed a shiny member in Levi the Lake of Rage Red Gyarados. Lastly, all the way south of Blackthorn City, I caught Tempest the Skarmory. Thank you to Viper073 aka Lunadium for suggesting Jolteon's nickname. As a fun fact, I originally planned on using Jolteon in my Heart Gold playthrough, but realized it was very unlikely I would obtain a Thunderstone, so I moved it here, and I'm glad I did. The MVP this time around wasn't as clear-cut as last time, but after careful consideration, the clear winner for me was Jimbo the Donphan. It's actually crazy how much work this guy put in for the Johto gyms, most notably being instrumental in taking down both Whitney and Morty in fairly quick succession. Overall, much like my silver team, every member of this team had their moment to shine and very much proved their worth. Especially Jolteon and Clefable, with those two being heavily considered for MVP. Although, I feel as though choosing to have Gyarados on my Crystal team and not my Heart Gold team may hinder that upcoming run. Regardless, I know that Gen 2 is probably Gyarados' weakest generation, but it still proved its worth. Lastly, I quickly want to mention that Meganium gets more hate than warranted, at least partially due to it being the first starter that is fully defense-oriented rather than offense or balanced. Typically, most kids growing up just want to use their starter to solo the game with 4 attacking moves, which is not the way Meganium is meant to excel. I used it very defensively, especially later on, and it provided fantastic support. Before moving on, I do quickly want to address what Pokemon I allow myself to use and don't. Basically, I want to try to keep my playthroughs as standard as possible to ensure people watching can use the same Pokemon as me if they wanted to. This means that I won't use Pokemon that require a second game to evolve, like by trading. I know that I could trade with myself even if I'm emulating, but in my opinion it feels disingenuous to do that. I don't hold it against anyone who does, and even envy you, but I can't bring myself to do it. The one exception to this so far was allowing myself to transfer some of my Pokemon in from Go for my Let's Go playthrough, but all of that was legitimate and done the intended way. When it comes to the difficulty, you can pretty much just copy and paste exactly what I said in my Gold and Silver video. Not a single trainer's team was changed from GS to Crystal, which is a missed opportunity in my opinion. Regardless, I did actually lose more times than in my Silver run, with a total of 6 losses. I somehow matched my losses to both Lance and Red, losing to each of them twice again. But this time, instead of losing to Whitney, I lost to Bugsy twice. Unfortunately, I would have won against Bugsy the first time had I used Tackle on a turn I used Flail, but it is what it is. I think overall, besides Bugsy, I had a much easier time against the gym leaders this time around. I didn't even need to use Phanpy for Falconer, with Chikorita sweeping with Razor Leaf, which made me respect the Pokemon even more than I already did. Phanpy utterly destroyed Whitney with Rollout and then Morty with Mud Slap. I did fight the non-linear gyms in a different order, this time fighting Price, then Chuck, then Jasmine, and none of them were problems for me. Claire was even easier, albeit still tough. The league overall was about the same difficulty-wise, and I could have won on my first or second try if I played a bit better, and the same goes for Red. The Kanto gyms were a cakewalk and nothing to write home about, even Blue was easier this time around. I did them in a different order compared to Silver, but it didn't make a difference. It's so interesting to see how different teams struggle and thrive in different spots depending on who you use. I think that while my Crystal team lost one more time than my Silver team, it's still the better team overall, struggling in less areas and having greater synergy with one another. Overall, Crystal took me about the same time to play as Gold and Silver, clocking in at about 28 hours. The amount of time spent grinding was cut down quite a bit, likely due to the addition of more trainers, with the League grind only taking an hour, while the Red grind stayed the same, taking 2 hours. There was some overall time added in trying to hatch Cleffa, with that taking a total of an hour, but that was somewhat matched by me not needing to do the bug catching contest a handful of times. Although the 30 minutes spent trying to catch a Phanpy cancels that out. Overall, I did get more time out of Crystal than Silver, but not by a lot. In terms of graphics, Crystal actually makes a small upgrade from Gold and Silver, which is assumed to be due to the wider color options of not being restricted to the original Game Boy. Several locations actually got facelifts too, with the Ice Path being the most notable. But other locations like Goldenrod's Game Corner and Radio Tower and the Champions Room got updates too. Even the exteriors of buildings look more detailed now, like the Burn Tower now actually looking burned, tall buildings like the Sprout Tower and Lighthouse looking taller, and even most buildings in general now getting more windows. What most of you who have played Crystal have been waiting for me to talk about is the animated battle sprites. Every single Pokemon in the game will now play a short animation when their front sprite is viewed, either in a battle against them or in a stat screen. These animations not only look fantastic, but go a long way in making the Pokemon themselves feel more alive and personal. I absolutely adore these sprites, and is genuinely one of the biggest reasons for me wanting to come back to play Crystal time and time again. Now as for the music, Crystal's soundtrack is just Gold and Silver's, but with a few new additions. I'm not going to list them all, but the main event in this case is the Legendary Beast battle theme. Not only is this track fantastic, but it's also the first instance of legendary Pokemon having their own battle theme, a tradition that would continue in future games. Pokemon Crystal was released in the US in 2001 on the Game Boy Color. Like I mentioned before, Crystal is the third enhanced version to Pokemon Gold and Silver, meaning they're 95% the same game apart from a few additions and changes. Unlike Gold and Silver, Crystal is not compatible with older generations of Game Boy, meaning it's only playable on the GBC and systems that can play GBC games. If you want an original cartridge yourself, keep in mind that original Gen 2 games are unable to send Pokemon forward to later generations. Not only that, but just like gold and silver, the internal battery that holds the save data has a shelf life of about 10 years, so obtained copies are not guaranteed to have the ability to hold save data. If you do still want one, the price is a bit turbulent but can be as cheap as about 25 to 30 US dollars, but it isn't uncommon to see it as high as or even higher than $200. There is also the 3DS Virtual Console version, which has the ability to let you catch Celebi, trade wirelessly, and transfer your Pokemon to bank, but it is no longer obtainable as of 2023. I would then say that an original cartridge is your only choice, but if you're familiar with my videos, then you know there's always another way. To this day, it is a damn shame that Nintendo or the Pokemon Company have yet to put any older Pokemon games on Switch or Switch 2, seemingly on purpose for some reason. Here we are again, and for the first time in quite a while, an actually shorter video out of me. Playing through Crystal again has been a blast and kind of a full circle moment for me, having recorded and posting videos of it online all those years ago. Without further ado, when it comes to ranking Crystal, it wasn't very difficult to place at all in my opinion. In what may not be a huge surprise, Pokemon Crystal belongs just ahead of Gold and Silver in the number 4 slot. If you played both Crystal and Gold or Silver, this shouldn't come as a surprise to you since Crystal is similar but slightly better than Gold and Silver. There's basically no reason to play Gold and Silver over it unless you really want to use Mareep. Anyways, the next video will be finishing off the Johto Games trio with Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Speaking of which, here's my entire team for my upcoming playthrough of Heart Gold. If you have any nicknames to suggest, please do so in the comments of this video. I haven't thought of any myself yet, so there are a lot of options. For now. Also, before I get into my outro spiel, I want to provide a small update on the timeline of my next video and future ones as well. For the past few years, I've set a goal for myself to upload at least 4 videos per year, which I've maintained since 2023. As much as I'd love for this to continue, and will try to get videos out as soon as possible, I cannot guarantee that anymore. Before the end of the year, I will be welcoming my first child into this world, which I'm super excited about. I don't know what the journey of having a kid will entail, but please know that I don't plan on stopping these videos anytime soon. Making these videos has been a huge passion project of mine since the beginning, and I want to continue that as long as I have games that I love to talk about. I even hope to introduce my son to these games in videos someday. So just know that while my upload schedule may slow down, it will not stop. Thank you all so much for watching and for all of your support over the past few years. Every view, like, and comment means so much to me. If you have the time, please let me know what you thought about this video. My question for this video is which legendary is your favorite out of the duo and trio of this gen? Mine are Raikou for the beasts and Ho-Oh for the birds. Thanks again, and I hope to see you again soon!